Welcome to We Believe, a consideration of religious beliefs and God's Word, examined in conversation by James F. Walsh, an attorney and Roman Catholic deacon, and Dr. Richard Shriver, United Methodist minister and professor of theology. Each discussion embraces carefully chosen subjects, selected in an effort to deepen your religious awareness, in the sincere hope that We Believe will help provide a bridge of understanding among all the children of God.
Well, Richard, welcome to We Believe.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be with you.
You know, we've been handling some heavy stuff over the last few weeks. We've been talking about
You cleared up the mystery.
Well, if I cleared up the mystery, we are in heresy.
You're in terrible trouble, that's right.
Now, today, I thought we'd talk about the marks of the church. Now, that's less, it's less theological.
There was John Mark, and there was Mark the Gospel. And
if you just listen, you'll probably be able to figure this out. Now, this is less theological in the sense of the Trinity is pretty heavy theology.
I have a friend named Mark, too.
But if you just pay attention, Richard, you probably get through this thing. But it could be polemic. It could be argumentative. And you know how ecumenical I am. You know.
You work at it.
I work at it. I try. So I'll try to present this in an ecumenical manner. If we read over the life of Christ as found in the Gospels, we see that he selected his disciples, and from those disciples he selected 12 men he called apostles. And these men were to carry his message down through the ages. And of course, that should be the way of it, because Christ didn't just die for people who lived in the Holy Land around the year 33 A.D. He lived for all people of all time. And these men then were to carry his message to be the nucleus of his church down through the ages. Now, since Christ spent so much time training these people, and you know, they were with him day and night for about 3 years during his teaching, it would seem that he would give us some sign or some mark by which we could identify the church which he founded. And I would maintain or argue that if we look through the Scripture, he has done just that. He has stamped on his church, you might say, his trademark. And I will contend in this next few minutes that that trademark is that it's one, holy, universal, and apostolic. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
One, holy,
Catholic,
universal,
universal.
and apostolic.
Yeah.
Catholic, that's what the word Catholic means.
Yeah, it means universal. Actually, I found out researching for this, Catholic is the Greek and universal is the Latin.
Do you know that when the Methodists repeat the Apostles' Creed, they say, I believe in the Holy Catholic Church?
That's right. I want to ask you about that in the question and answer session. Yeah, that's a good question. Remind me to ask you that. Well, anyway, if you'll look at John 17:11, this is Christ here at the Last Supper, and he is really praying to his Father in this situation. It's John 17:11. Could you read that for us just to briefly?
I am prepared.
You're prepared.
It ought to be called the Gospel according to Jim.
That's the only one I use?
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Last week you actually got into Matthew.
Well, it's the only one I seem to need.
Well, it really does. I think that the Gospel of John probably does represent traditional Roman Catholic ideas better than the other three Gospels.
You think so? It's somewhat more developed, perhaps. Go ahead and read now. Go on.
Matthew.
John 17:11.
Jim 17:11.
All right.
No, this is from the fourth Gospel, John 17:11. And now I am no more in the world. This is Jesus speaking. I am no more in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to thee. Holy Father, keep them in thy name, which thou hast given me, that they may be one, even as we are one.
So when Christ says, keep them one, it seems like he wants unity. He wants oneness.
Who's he talking about?
Huh?
Who is he talking about?
He's talking to the apostles there. This is the Last Supper, according to John there. Now, another thing is, he wants them to be holy. This is another mark of his church. And also, stay right where you are, John 17:17. It's the same scene, really, only another part of his prayer there at the Last Supper, John 17:17.
Yeah, this is just a few verses down. Sanctify them in the truth. There's that word you used last week. Sanctify them.
To make holy.
From the Latin sanctus, which
That's right.
means holy. Sanctify them in the truth. Thy word is truth. You want me to go on?
Well, a little further.
As thou didst send me into the world, so I have sent them into the world.
What he's saying there, I would think you would agree. I want to make my people holy to send them out into the world to preach the gospel. That's what he's saying.
Okay.
And so one of the marks of the church then would be that it's holy. But also it's universal. Now, Richard, Matthew 24:14. You're familiar with Matthew. You've heard of that, Matthew. Huh? You think I haven't heard of Matthew.
I use it a lot, yeah.
All right. And he tells us that on one occasion, Christ is speaking there in Matthew 24:14. Have you got that?
Got it. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come.
Well, as you see, he says it's for everybody, not just for Jews or Greeks or Germans or Irish. It's for all people of all time. Finally, the last mark of the church we think would be apostolic. This is the fourth mark, you might say. It should be apostolic. Its history should reach right back to the apostles. And now, again, Matthew 28:18. I warned you on this one, 28:18.
Oh, 28:18. I was about to read 24:18.
Well,
but yeah, I knew that wasn't
28:18.
right. This, of course, is the Great Commission, isn't it?
Sure, yeah.
And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always to the close of the age.
Well, when he says, I'm with you always to the close of the age, it sounds like that's a promise he's going to be with the church till the end of time.
Yeah, and that, of course, is the closing verse
of Matthew.
Of the Gospel of Matthew.
Well, I would say then that Christ has said, to sum it up, the church is one, holy, universal, and apostolic. Now, it's no secret to you, we've worked together a long time.
A lot of years.
You know very well the Catholic Church claims to be that entity founded by Jesus Christ for the salvation of souls. So I think it would follow logically, if in fact the Catholic Church has those signs, it could claim to be that church founded by Christ.
Are we going to talk about Peter?
Yeah, but that's later. That's a couple of shows down the road.
Okay, because I want to affirm your thoughts about Peter.
In the question, you can bring Peter in if you want to, and the question answers
Okay.
that. But let me finish this section here.
All right, go ahead.
Anyway, so what I'm going to try to do, if the Catholic Church does fit those signs, there might be validity to her claim. If, on the other hand, she doesn't, then we could dismiss her claim. That's
and
what
these are the marks of the church.
These, I would say, are the marks of the church. First of all, Christ prayed for unity, for oneness. Now, there are lots of kinds of unity. Unity of leadership, unity of worship, and unity of belief. Well, I would say when a Catholic says the Apostles' Creed in Boston, Berlin, or Bangkok, they mean pretty much the same thing. As far as leadership, you know, it's the Pope and the bishops together. They're the leaders of the church. As far as worship, you know, it's what we call the Mass. You can have that in a magnificent cathedral lasting an hour and a half, or you could say the Mass in 10 minutes on the hood of a Jeep in the battle zone. But it's the same holy sacrifice of the Mass, either place.
Is it generally felt that any time Catholics worship, it is the Mass, or
oh no,
the Mass is the
Mass is a special ceremony, you might say.
serving of the Lord's Supper.
Communion. When you have the communion, generally you have the Mass. Okay, holiness. Well, one of the best arguments against the church is some of the lax and bad members of it. I think maybe I would fall in that category.
You better be careful here.
Yeah, but, you know, Christ said, he compared the church to a fishing net. Remember that? Good and bad fish are caught. Sometime he compared the church to a field of grain, you know, with the weeds growing up. So Christ said there would be bad members, you know. But also, I think we have, it's true, produced good, holy people over the years. I think of your favorite saint, St. Francis of Assisi, you know. And also we got priests and nuns and religious brothers that give their life to the service of God and their fellow man. So I think the church could be claim holiness. Coming out of the third mark is universal. Well, it's universal. It's all over the world, but also it's universal in time. Its history goes back to the time of the apostles.
And it's
go ahead.
Universal in the sense that it is the same everywhere, isn't it?
Well, that's right. There are a billion Catholics out there. Probably they're in every country in the world, certainly every continent.
A billion?
Well, now, how about the last point then? Is it universal in time?
Pretty soon you're going to have more Catholics than people, if you're not
maybe. All right, the last mark, the fourth mark, is it apostolic? And that just means, does it reach back to the time to the apostles and Christ? Does it get its authority from Christ and the apostles? It could be universal in time and reach back past the time of Christ. Buddhism, for example, might be founded before the time of Christ. But it's apostolic in the sense that historically it goes back and gets its authority from Christ and the apostles.
And is true to that teaching.
We like to think so.
Yeah.
We may discuss that in the question session. But I would end up by saying, from the days the apostles laid hands on Timothy and Titus, the episcopal power has been handed down year after year, age after age, in the bishops and priests of the church. So we would say the Catholic Church does fit the model. It's one holy, Catholic, or universal, and apostolic. I got through that, Richard. I wasn't sure I'd make it.
I think you may have a second or two left.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know.
Well, you know, the apostolic, I want us to talk about that.
Okay, you got 2 minutes.
Well, no.
You wouldn't know you had such a luxury.
Well, you know, just that we're able to trace it backwards historically to the apostles, that, of course, I think a lot of Protestants don't really know that the Catholic Church can do that. And that is important. But
you know, I had my daughter went to a very prominent Baptist school, I'll have to say, without naming. And they told her the Catholic Church was founded in the year 300 or 400.
A Baptist church without naming the denomination, is that?
Well, not the denomination. We don't name the college or the school. It's a very fine college and school, but it did seem to me that was kind of off the wall.
That they said that the Catholic Church was founded in 400?
300 or 400.
Yeah.
What do you think they meant by that?
Well, I suspect it probably is a reference to the beginning of the Catholic Church as being when Constantine accepted Christianity, but that's not historically right.
Maybe we could kick that around a little bit during the question and answer.
I hope so.
But I think we'll have time. And so, Richard, thank you, and we'll be back, folks, just in a minute.
Apostolic also means true to what the apostles were being taught.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Stay with us.
Today's We Believe program is brought to you by a grant from your local Knights of Columbus Council. Founded by Father Michael McGivney, the Knights of Columbus began when a few men gathered in a church hall in 1882. Today, the Knights of Columbus has a membership of over 1.5 million men, with local councils spanning the globe. The Knights of Columbus is a fraternal service order of Catholic men dedicated to providing support to the individual, the family, and the community. The principles of the order are charity, unity, fraternity, and patriotism. The Knights of Columbus truly surge with service. For more information, contact your local council or write We Believe, Post Office Box 50654, Nashville, Tennessee 37205. That's We Believe, Post Office Box 50654, Nashville, Tennessee 37205. Now back to our program.
Hi, I'm Kim Bollinger, and welcome back to We Believe. We're continuing our discussion in the second half of the program on the marks of the church. Now, Richard, some people say that the Catholic Church was not officially established until the year 300, and I have a problem with that, but I was wondering what you would say.
I was accidentally listening to a TV evangelist one night, and he was prancing across the stage, waving his Bible, saying, "My Catholic friends say that Peter went to Rome, but as for me, I'm going to believe my Bible, and it says in the Epistle of Peter that he went to Babylon." And I threw a brick through the TVs. No, I really screamed, and I turned the TV to a different station. That evangelist has not done his homework, and I think he knows better. But there was no Babylon in the time of Jesus or Peter or the early church. Babylon was destroyed almost 500 years earlier by the Persians, and the Babylonian Empire was ended. That in the Epistle of Peter is a reference to Rome, because to the early church, Rome was the Babylon of the Old Testament. It was the enemy. Babylon had been the great enemy of the Jews. And so a reference to Babylon was really a reference to Rome. Now I don't know that it proves that the Epistle of Peter was written in Rome, but we do have plenty of evidence that Peter did go to Rome. He went there to join Paul. Now, what I think that the church, the Roman Catholic Church, really does stand on, and I think it's correct, is that Jesus very specifically took this man Simon and said to him, "I'm going to call you Rock, because you're going to be the foundation of my church." And the Greek word for rock, Petros, Peter. So he took the Jewish name Simon and gave him the name Rock or Peter. We know that Peter did go to Rome. We know that Paul preceded him and he came and joined. Now there's a good bit of evidence to that effect, and if in a later show, Jim, you want to talk about that evidence, I don't think there's any question historically, but that Peter, and Jesus also said, "I give you the keys to the kingdom." I think Jesus expected Peter to head up the church that would be forever on this earth, and that with Peter and Paul going to Rome, it took the center of authority for the church from Jerusalem, where it did originate, to Rome. And that happened in the lifetime of the apostles. That happened before 60 A.D.
But you know what? I thought that question might have been driving at. As I said, that was told to my daughter. I think what they were saying, in effect, is when the church came out of the catacombs, I think the year was 313, the Edict of Milan, and it then was recognized as the official religion later of the Roman Empire. I think what they're saying, that's when the Catholic Church got started. Actually, the same people that were in the catacombs the day before the Edict of Milan are the same people that came out the next day.
Oh,
so,
sure.
I think they're trying to say perhaps that the Roman government took over the church. Actually, it was the other way around. The church took over the Roman government because eventually they moved the empire's capital to Constantinople, and the church filled the vacuum in the western part of the world, in Western Europe.
Now,
So,
the lag between the time I'm talking about, somewhere around 60 A.D., and the 313 that he's talking about, of course, That's the period of Roman persecution, the 240 years, in which it was illegal in the Roman Empire to be Christian. But the church survived, and the church survived in Rome. We know that there was never a time during the persecutions that there was not a presence of the church in Rome, and that was its center, and has been since. And you know, I'd like to think that Nashville is the center of Christianity. That's where the center of Methodism is, at least American Methodism. Possibly British Methodists would like to say London. But I really do think that Christians around the world realize that Jerusalem was the original center, but that it moved during the time of the apostles to Rome, and that even today, Rome is.
Continuing your thought about Methodism, though, that kind of brings us into another question that I'd like to get covered. If the church is one, going back to the marks of the church is one, the church is holy. Why do we have so many denominations? Why are there so many churches, so many Christian churches?
Is that for me or
That's
Richard?
for Richard.
All right.
Sorry.
That's good. I'm glad you got that.
I'm sorry. I think it's the great tragedy of the church. We call it the splintered body of Christ. And the reason that Jim and I have been doing this show for many years now is because we believe that we need to be turning that around and bringing the church back together again. As a Protestant, I firmly believe that during the 16th century and the decades leading up to it, that the church, and this is the ancestral church for me as well as it is for Jim or you, that the church in the Middle Ages developed some corruption, some very serious corruption. I think that the Protestant Reformation saved the church. I think that the Counter-Reformation, which the Roman Catholics did after the Reformation in the period of 25 years following, I think the Counter-Reformation did more to save the church. But without the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Counter-Reformation, I think if it hadn't been for those two periods of history, we very likely could have lost the church. We saved the church, but we divided it, and it started a process that keeps on dividing. And now, anytime someone disagrees with a member of the official board, they split, and we form a new denomination. We've got to stop that. We've got to begin looking at each other as Jim and I are trying to do as friends who are saying to each other, I love you, I respect you, I want to know what you're thinking, I want to understand what you're thinking, and the other person looking back and saying yes. And we don't maybe have to agree on everything, but, and again, a Methodist motto, it's right interesting that one of John Wesley's mottos was, if your heart is as my heart, then give me your hand.
And I might just throw this in.
Sense.
You know, I think we're doing an ecumenical show, and for the last 500 years, Catholics and Protestants have tended to shout past each other. And ecumenism suggests that you don't have to agree with the other guy, but at least give them a hearing. Hear what they're saying rather than being argumentative. And that's what we've been trying to do over the years here with this We Believe show.
And understand that the love and fellowship of the church can get past the disagreements and continue.
That's true. I think we all have more in common than we have
In opposition.
I don't know. In opposition. Thank you. I've lost that word there. It was out there somewhere.
Probably just so overwhelmed by our...
I guess so. It must be. I just, the bright light is too much. The other thing I wanted to try and get into is the concept of the church being holy, that the church should be holy, and that brings us to the really painful issue of the problem in the priesthood today. We don't have a whole lot of time, but if you could address that as briefly as you can,
that's
perhaps.
my question.
That's your question. I've given him 2
Well, I
hours.
think the church has to address it. It can't avoid it. I think it's got to bite the bullet and face it. And I think actually it's simply a small percentage of people who have not been committed to what they're supposed to be committed to. The priests are supposed to be committed to celibacy. It's tough, but that's the life they've chosen, and that's what they've been committed to, and some of them haven't lived up to it. And I might say I think the media has done a service to the church, something like the Protestant Reformation, to point it out, and the church has to address it and to clear it up. Now, if you look at it statistically, the truth is, I think, probably there are no more Catholics or clergy in that than maybe some other clergy. But in any event, the truth is that, and as a lawyer I can say this, the Catholic Church makes a more inviting target for lawyers. And here's why. 1, it's big. And 2, it's a corporation soul. Now, what that means is that all the property in a diocese belongs to the bishop. So if you sue this church over here, you can reach the assets of the whole diocese, which could be millions. If you're suing just one Protestant church on the corner of 5th and Union, well, I don't think one is there, the only assets you can reach are those assets of that little church. But when you sue the Catholic Church, you can reach the assets of hundreds of churches in a diocese. So that's part of the problem too, I think. But I think the church has to address it and solve it and face it and move on. And I think perhaps they're trying to do that.
I think they are too, and I appreciate. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just psychological illness is not limited to a church or a profession, clergy. It's everywhere, you know, a small percentage maybe. But I think we need some compassion for those who are sick as well.
I agree. We need compassion for the victims of this as well. Well, it's a touchy subject, and I think that we'll probably touch on it again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on We Believe.
Today's program has been brought to you by a grant from your local Knights of Columbus Council. The Knights of Columbus is a fraternal order of Catholic men dedicated to the service of God and neighbor. Last year alone, the Knights provided over $109 million and 55 million volunteer hours helping those in need. The Knights of Columbus truly surge with service. Deacon Walsh and Dr. Schreiber would like to hear from you if you have questions or topics you want discussed. Or if you'd like a free booklet giving further information about the topics discussed today, write We Believe at Post Office Box 50654, Nashville, Tennessee 37205. Visit our website at www.webelieveshow.org. When you write, be sure to mention the number of the program. This is program number 834, The Marks of the Church. Thanks for watching We Believe.